Maybe we can just do a quick test. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me clearly. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me clearly. So nice. Okay, great. Hi, California. How y'all doing? Nice to see you. Nice to see you, rabbis. Nice to see you, ladies and gentlemen. Rabbi, as you mentioned, I am speaking to you from Israel. It is now 5:30 a.m. And I discovered something recently in the world of Zoom talks. I used to travel around the world speaking, and now it's all on Zoom. So you know that saying that that dog is man's best friend? Everybody hear that saying, dog is man's best friend, right? I've discovered it's not true. Ladies and gentlemen, coffee is man's best friend. It is 5:30 a.m. I am raring to go, fully caffeinated, so I look forward to spending a little time together. The subject that we're going to talk about is indeed a little uncomfortable. I once heard a story about this older gentleman. He says to his wife, honey, come sit on the bed beside me for a minute, please. Kind of strange request. So she sits beside him. He says, honey, remember when we were in our 20s and I broke my leg and you were there with me? Yes, honey, I was. Remember when we were in our 40s and I went bankrupt and you were there with me? Yes, honey, I was. And remember when we were in our 50s and I had my heart attack and you were there with me? Yes, honey, I was. So he says, well, I have something important to tell you. And a tear rolls down her cheek and she leans in. He says, honey, you're bad luck. I mean, there are some subjects that just seem like they're bad luck. We don't want to talk about them. We don't want to deal with them. Certainly death, burial, cremation, like who needs it? It's kind of taboo. A comedian once said, I don't want to achieve immortality through my work. I want to achieve it through not dying. Like we prefer not talking about this kind of stuff. But it's important to talk about it. When we were kids, looking around the screens over here, when we were kids, 30, 40, 50 years ago, the percentage of Americans who were being cremated when they died was very low. Percentage of Jews was low single digits. As of today, overall American statistic, it's over 55% today of the American dead are being cremated. And Jews are not that far behind. We're not at 55%, but it is tremendously high. We don't know for sure exactly how many American Jews are being cremated, what the exact percentage is, but I will give you an estimate. About 10 years ago, Rabbi Elchanan Zone from New York, did an informal study, and he found that in Jewish funeral homes, about 20% of the requests, over 20% of the requests were for cremations. Did you get those caveats, by the way? That's 10 years ago. That's in New York, the most culturally Jewish part of the country. And that is people who actually choose a Jewish funeral home at over 20% of the requests. Never mind the mass numbers of people who are not connected to choose a non-denominational funeral home or no funeral home. So there's no doubt that the national rate of cremation amongst American Jewish dead is 1/3 now and is probably significantly higher in many parts of the country. So my question for you is why? What I love about Zoom is that it's incredibly interactive, actually. You have a chat box. For me, it's on the bottom of my screen. I don't know where it is for you. You can chat to everyone. And I'd like you to tell me why people today, all types, Christians, Jews, whatever, in America, are choosing cremation more than ever before. When I was a kid, very small percentage. Today, the norm. You tell me why. We're going to do 3 things together tonight. We're going to discuss the reasons why people are choosing cremation. We're going to analyze them. We're then going to get into the reasons that Jews have favored burial historically. And then we're going to get to questions and comments at the end. So Limor is saying environmental reasons. People want to save the planet. Absolutely. Money. Somebody's saying money. Financial reasons. Thank you. Less expensive. Several people are saying less expensive. Absolutely. We're going to talk about it. Environmental waste of land, right? That's a different environmental point. Ecological reasons. Good. So far we have financial reasons and environmental reasons. Misinformation and conformity. Absolutely. Definitely there. The money sign, Steve. Thanks. I appreciate your shorthand over there. Less expensive. Jews are assimilated, so to speak, don't have connection to Judaism, right? Just kind of follow what people are doing. Like the urn, like to have the urn with them. That's a very good point. Thank you. Thank you, Scott and Lisa. And okay, you guys, I'm impressed. California, you're getting and Vegas, right? So you're getting the top 10 pretty quickly over here. It's pretty ignorance of Jewish tradition, very good. Easier to choose, seems quick and easy, right? Families want to be together, right? In the old country, you had a family plot, and this is a new way of trying to do that. So last minute cremation is easy, right? If we put in our thought, then we are giving them that option instead of teaching why we should not. In other words, it's an option today. I think what Tilly is saying, it's like, it just seems like an option instead of it just being not even a thought. Very good. Okay, you guys did great. Thank you. If anything else, you're welcome to type it in. But you hit the main ones pretty quickly. That's great. It's funny. I used to speak. Rabbi Rifkin from Northridge, and I go back a long time. I've the privilege of being there many times. And so historically, what I Jamie saying because they have tattoos and can't be in a Jewish cemetery. Very interesting. We'll talk about that. Remind me to tell you what my grandmother said about that. I'll get to it later. So what I have always focused on, I've been in education in some form for over 20 years, and I was never into this subject. I wrote a book called Raising Kids to Love Being Jewish, and I speak to parents and grandparents about keeping their families Jewish. I spoke to your Hebrew school, I remember the Sunday morning, and I speak about why be Jewish. I speak about relationships and marriage, happiness, all this kind of stuff. I'm kind of a positive, I try and be a positive kind of a guy. And I was never into, the burial subject. It always seemed kind of gross and morbid, right? But now it's the number one request that I get as a first talk with the community is burial and cremation. It is extremely common. I'm speaking on Zoom at least once a week about burial and cremation to different communities around the world. And the reasons that people give when I ask this question about why people today, Christians, Jews, whatever, why Westerners are choosing cremation, it's exactly what you listed, remarkably consistent. This is what my research found. I wrote a book on the subject, Cremation or Burial, A Jewish View. It came out in 2012. My research and my experience in speaking, this is exactly what people say. So let's go through your reasons, and we're going to analyze them. We're going to see that some of these reasons that people choose cremation are stronger than others. Okay, number one, you start with the environment. I am a big environmentalist. I love hiking outdoors, and it means a lot to me. I grew up that way, and I teach my kids that way. And there's two big environmental critiques, environmental subjects that are in terms of burial and cremation. You mentioned both of them in your chat. Number one is the amount of land that is used, and number two is what goes into the land. They're related, but they're separate, right? One is how much is wasting the land, and the other is what you're putting into the land. So let's do with the amount of land. The argument goes like this. We have a limited amount of land. We have a growing population. We are gradually running out of land. And if you're a good person, why would you want to waste land on a dead body that doesn't need it? Leave it for the birds and the trees and playgrounds. It's a very moral argument, actually, right? What do Jews say when we have a drink? L'chaim, right? Living takes precedence. The only problem is that I ran the numbers. I'm not the first person to run the numbers, but I did run the numbers. Since my book came out in 2012 and giving hundreds of talks, I've never been challenged once in the numbers because I believe they are inarguable. I'm not going to bore you with stats. I will give you one statistic right now. If every American who died, and I'm only speaking to the Jewish community, 1.6% of the population, right? But if every American who died, it's about 3 million Americans a year die, right? Thank God there's more births and immigration, so the population goes up. But about 3 million died last year, obviously, unfortunately, was higher than normal, right? If every American who died were to be buried, it would take, get this, it would take 10,000 years to use up 1% of America's landmass. That's if every American who died, it would take 10,000 years to use up 1% of America's landmass. There is plenty of land. There is no issue. You do not have to choose between land is for the living and land is for the dead. True, if you want to be buried in downtown LA or Manhattan or downtown Miami, you've got a problem. Land is at a premium. But how often do you go to a cemetery? I mean, like, if you're going every day, that's probably too much, guys. I don't think it's meant for that, right? You can't go out 30 minutes or 60, within half an hour or 1 hour of every metropolitan area in North America. And it's true in South America, and Europe, and Africa, and Asia, and it's true in Australia. By the way, this is only not true, to my knowledge, in Hong Kong and Singapore, and there are solutions there. But there is plenty of land. By the way, if you doubt me, okay, next time you fly, remember when we were allowed to fly? When the plane takes off, look down. There's a ton of land. There's no issue whatsoever. Within 30 minutes or 60 minutes, you don't have to be buried in Wyoming. In California, within an hour of your house, there's plenty of land. That is not an issue. By the way, serious environmentalists do not even mention the issue of how much land. Burial is actually open areas where there is air movement, where there's green. It's not an issue, right? Cremation companies mention this because they want your money, but that's not a real issue. The real environmental issue is not about the amount of land. There's plenty of land, no issue, no problem. The real environmental issue is what gets put into the land. And this is legitimately a big one. Two main problems. Problem number one, metal caskets. A tremendous amount of metal is put into the ground every day with every burial that happens. You have to make the metal, form it, you put it into the ground, it rusts for hundreds of years, a legitimate environmental disaster. Number two, embalming. Forgive me, this is a talk about burial and cremation, so I'm sure you realize that some things wouldn't be so pleasant. If you don't know what an embalming is, it's pretty simple. They remove the liquids, basically the blood, replace it with chemicals, preservatives. Formaldehyde is still the number one choice for most funeral homes, right? It keeps the body a little bit longer. The body still decomposes. It just lasts longer, right? The US embalms much more than any other country, right? I mean, the antecedents are in Egypt, where the pharaohs were, in a way, were embalmed. But it's really the US that embalms more than anyone, starting the Civil War, sending the boys back up north. And the main, it's terrible for the environment. Gallons and gallons of toxic chemicals being put into the body and then seeping into the ground. So two very legitimate, serious environmental problems with modern burials, right? Anybody notice the commonality of these two things? Rabbis, you are not allowed to answer this question. What do these two facets have in common? Metal caskets and embalming. Anyone know? Thank you very much. I see in the chat. We don't do them. Judaism insists on simple wood caskets. Pine is the wood of choice, clear, biodegradable. By the way, here in Israel, they carry the body to the grave in a casket, but the body is actually put naturally into the ground with no casket, just in burial shrouds. They reuse the caskets here, actually. It's kind of interesting, right? In most places, you actually need to, the municipality or the custom is that you need wooden caskets to be buried. Biodegradable, they put a few holes on the bottom, right? So that the body, ashes to ashes, goes back to the earth. So we don't do the metal casket thing. Embalming, we most certainly don't do, right? Considered a desecration of the body. If you wonder why that would be, and if you have a masochistic streak in you, after this talk, go on YouTube and watch an embalming. You will understand in about 10 seconds why we don't do it, okay? It's an awful thing, right? So Jewish burial has always been considered a model of environmentalism. Environmentalists are not in favor of cremation. Cremation uses a tremendous amount of fossil fuels. Just think about it for a second. We're all getting rid of our gas-guzzling cars, and we're buying Teslas and electric vehicles, and suddenly you're using all this energy, fossil fuels, to burn up bodies. It's tremendous waste of gas and terrible for the environment, the carbon footprint, right? And furthermore, cremation releases toxic chemicals into the air. If you're like my age and older, which many of us are, and if you have a filling in your teeth, you've got a filling in your teeth, you probably have mercury in your mouth. For younger people, by the way, they don't do cavities with mercury anymore. But our generation and older, they did. And when they cremate, they're releasing mercury into the air, and it's really bad for the environment. Many municipalities have a rule that you're not allowed to build a crematorium beside a school. Ask yourself why. By the way, close to home, you guys are in Southern California, most of you. LA, in the LA Times, about 2 weeks ago, there was a big article, maybe 3 weeks ago, there was a big article that the municipality relaxed the rules on the ovens, on crematoriums, because there is a serious problem of air pollution from crematoriums. They have a maximum number of bodies they're allowed, but because of the current crisis, there's bodies waiting in the hallways. So they relaxed the rules to allow them go against the air pollution rules temporarily to cremate more bodies. Meaning, cremation is pollution. It's a law. Okay, it's not me saying it. Google it. Where environmentalists are not in favor of cremation. It uses fossil fuels. It releases chemicals into the air. They are in favor of what's called green burial. Green burial essentially means no metal caskets, no embalming, and how you design the cemetery, right, should be done in accordance with proper environmental standards, many of which are and some aren't. There's all different types, and they're getting better. So the idea that we should care about the environment, 100%, I'm very into it, right? And burial, Jewish burial, is the model and is the way to go. Okay, next, few people mentioned visiting the grave. So in the old country, so to speak, there would be a family plot, generation after generation, and on the yahrzeit or Mother's Day, Father's Day, whatever, for the holidays, people would go. Today, you got the grandparents in the Northeast, and you got the grandkids, and you got the kids in the West Coast, and you got the grandkids in Florida. Like, nobody's going to visit. Nobody lives there. People say, where am I going to be buried? Here? I don't have any kids here. There. Who knows how long they're going to be there? So why bother having a grave? Or maybe your kids, and grandkids are not so traditional. They don't visit graves. So the thinking is, why bother having a grave? Just take the reins with me. So I want to test your Jewish knowledge, and we'll see what you think. In a previous life before COVID, my side job was a tour guide. I'm a licensed tour guide. I take families around and communities around the country. Here in Israel, I go to Poland as well. But if this ever ends, you're welcome to come and be in touch. True or false, ladies and gentlemen? True means thumbs up. False, give me a thumbs down. True or false? Doron, my favorite place to bring tourists in Israel is the grave of Moses, the Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu. True, it's my favorite place, ladies and gentlemen. My favorite place in Israel. False, it's not. Stella says true. Michael says not. Shanzi's saying true. Bernardo's saying true. By the way, it looks good. I don't know what you're eating, but the chopsticks were making me hungry before, and it's only 5 a.m., which is kind of weird. I see true, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, I see Steve is saying false. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it was a trick question, guys. I'm sorry. I just got to have fun. It's early in the morning. Moses is not buried in Israel. Remember the end of the Bible? He never makes it in, right? Martin Luther King Jr., his famous thing about going up the mountain, looking into the promised land. He's using the imagery of the end of the Bible, that Moses goes up the mountain and is allowed to look in. He's not buried here. He's in the present country of Jordan, right? Furthermore, we don't know where he's buried. God hid the place of his burial because it was such a concern that he was such a great prophet that people would start to think of him as some kind of a god. So God hid the place of his burial. Now, 3,300 years ago, when Moses died, we know there was cremation. Archaeologically, we know it was the norm. Yet God did not choose cremation. He chose burial. And think about it. Has anyone ever visited the grave of Moses? Ever knowingly visited the grave of Moses? And the answer is no. And yet, God chose burial. Because we, in our modern minds, we combine two things: having a grave and visiting a grave. And we assume if no one's going to visit the grave, either they live far away, they're not traditional, they don't visit graves, then why bother having one? But one of the most famous burials in history in the Bible. There's two famous burials in the Bible, right? The really famous ones. Abraham buries Sarah at the beginning, and at the end, God buries Moses. It teaches us that these two things are not related. If you like visiting graves, you can visit a grave. It's great. I actually like visiting graves. I connect to it somehow. Don't worry, I don't go every day. I'm not a weirdo. But like I'm originally from Montreal. When I go back and visit, if it's not the deep winter, I visit the family plot, and it means something to me. You can go. You don't have to go. There's no obligation. But it has nothing to do with whether or not the body deserves a grave and should get a grave. Moses proves it. By the way, people think that cremated remains, help with mobility. I mean, just think about it for a second, right? So the parents pass, right? And the kids have 2 urns. Next generation has 4 urns. Next generation has 8 urns. Next generation has 16 urns. I mean, I'm being a little bit facetious, but like, you get the point, right? Our homes and our lives are not meant for the long-term respectful care of cremated remains. And at some point, they're going to be put in the park or put in the water or thrown in the garbage or whatever, forgotten. It just does. It's not a real solution. Okay, let's keep going. We're moving quickly because I want to keep time for the other parts of our program. People say that, the assimilation is less traditional. People do less traditional things. Absolutely. And it's just, cremation is kind of like a fad today. So people just kind of follow, the norm of what they hear and what they see. I hope it's okay, rabbis. I'm not wearing a tie for you right now. I used to travel around when I was on the circuit until COVID, and I would always, dress up. Here, it's like, like I'm in my home office and it's 5 a.m. I'm just, I only wear a tie now once a week, generally. Friday nights, which is not far from me. It's in like 7-8 hours. So Friday nights, our synagogues have been closed here in Israel, basically closed for almost a year. Up and open, close, 5 people, 10 people maximum. So on Shabbat we have services in my parking lot upstairs, and it's the only time on Friday night do I actually wear a tie. The rest of the week I don't. And my kids are always complaining about my ties. I forget if it's my ties are too wide or my ties are too thin, right? It's like, they're not in style. And I have 5 teenagers, guys, okay? 5 teenagers. Give me some love, people. 5 teenagers, okay? So why do I not get rid of my ties? Because and I know that in 5 years, these ties are going to be back in, right? Fads come and fads go. Ties are wide, ties are thin, ties. That's how you're going to choose what to do with your body. Because this is just like, what's in the news today and what people, this is some things you should think about, right? That's why we're here tonight. Go to a lecture, read a book, whatever it's going to be, think about it. Just because other people are doing it, I don't know if that's the way to make big decisions in life. The other reason that people talk about, there's a few people that mentioned sort of quick and easy. I'll tell you, I was always into the positive subjects I mentioned before, raising kids, love being Jewish, and grandkids, and passing on Judaism, and relationships and marriage and things like that. And then how did I get into this subject? Make a long story short, I was in Florida about 10 years ago on a speaking tour, and I opened up a Jewish newspaper, and there's an ad in a Jewish newspaper from a Jewish funeral home offering Jewish cremations, and I was in shock. I'm a traditional Jewish boy from Montreal, Canada. And listen, I grew up and there's all different types of Jews, and some do more and some do less and some do this and some do that. But there were some just like absolutes that like all Jews did. Like growing up, everybody knew that Jews do not play World Series baseball on Yom Kippur. That's a given, right? Everybody knew that Jews do not pay full retail price. Okay, that's a given. And everybody knew that Jews don't cremate, right? It was just like, it was a generation after the Holocaust. It was just not done, right? So I was in shock when I saw this ad, and going back 10, 12 years. And I started researching it. And I spent about 3 years researching. That the result was my book and my talks on the subject. I want to share with you the biggest surprise in my research, right? Because I knew nothing about the subject before. I always assumed that cremating a body was something like using a microwave oven. Put the thing in, press the button, 3 minutes later it comes out, maybe already in an urn, I don't know, right? Sorry guys, it's going to be a little unpleasant to hear this, but it's important. Typical thin person today. Remember when we were thin before COVID? the COVID-19, the 19 pounds, whatever they talk about. I don't know about you, but this last year has done a number on my weight. But if you're a thin person, it takes 60 to 90 minutes to convert, to cremate, right? For a heavier person, like many of us, it's 2 to 3 hours. For someone who's technically obese, that's a BMI of 30 or above, right? It's 3 to 4 hours. During that time, the body is not placid and calm and spiritual. The muscles are contracting and expanding. Brain is sizzling. It's a very unpleasant thing. It's neither quick nor clean. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that burial is pleasant, okay? It's not. I remember high school lab, okay? Decomposition's gross. But I will tell you, they're both kind of gross. And get this, burial is the natural way of every living thing. A plant grows, blossoms, goes back to Mother Earth. An animal is born, runs around the forest, goes back to Mother Earth. Burial is natural. Cremation is an artificial, man-made grasp at control. It's neither quick nor easy, and it's not natural. Let's do a few more points, and then I want to switch and go over to the reasons that people get into, that reason why people go to burial, why Jews have gone to burial, right? So we talked about misinformation, conformity. We talked about the environmental reasons. We talked about transporting, certainly, transporting it. I mean, it's certainly easier to take an urn, but on the other hand, you got to burn the body. Ignorance, right? So when you go through the reasons, somebody said tattoos, right? So my grandmother used to say, it's a baba mice. You know that phrase, the Yiddish phrase, baba mice? Baba is a grandmother, and mice is like a story. So my grandmother used to say, it's a baba mice. There's no law about person having a tattoo not being allowed in a Jewish cemetery. It's just not true. My grandmother would say that, some grandmother didn't want her grandkids to get tattoos and so made it up to scare them. It's not true. So we do believe that the body is holy and we're not into tattoos, but it doesn't prevent the person being in a cemetery when their time comes. By the way, somebody also in the chat mentioned suicide. Theoretically, that's actually closer to the truth. Theoretically, a person who commits suicide is considered guilty of murder, right? Murdering themselves is no different than murdering someone else, and they shouldn't be in a Jewish cemetery. But that's a theoretical deterrent. It's not a practical one. The rabbis say that we know that 99.99999% people commit suicide. They had mental health issues. They should have had therapy. They should have had medication. They regret it, whatever it is. And they are buried in Jewish cemeteries. That's the historical rule. It's a theoretical point. It's not a practical point. So those aren't real issues. When you go through it, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll get back to more if I missed any, when you go through the reasons that people choose cremation today, one by one, we just went through, I think, the top 10. They're simply not true. Fake news, as the modern phrase calls it, misinformation. It's not better for the environment, doesn't solve mobility problems, but it's not quick and clean, right? There's only one reason, actually, that is undeniable. There is one reason people choose cremation today that is undeniably true. What is it, ladies and gentlemen? What do you think? Ellie, you're saying it with your phrase exactly right. In 9 out of 10 cases, cremation is cheaper than burial, often significantly so, where a burial can end up costing $8,000, $10,000, $12,000. Cremations are usually a few, 2, 3, 4, start to finish. Sometimes less. Do a 1-800 number. Now, you and I both know that if you plan this out over the years, it's a Starbucks every couple of days. Like it's not a big difference in the long term, right? But if you leave it till the end, and it's a $5,000 or $6,000 difference or whatever, so that's the real reason. So now we've discussed the reasons why people choose cremation. We've gone through them and saying they're really not true. It's not better for the environment. It's not this. But why is it worth the extra money? Gentlemen, when you proposed to your beloved and you gave her a ring, I assume you did not get the ring from the bottom of a Cracker Jack box, right? You actually put some money into it. So I'm going to try and explain, according to my understanding, why Jews have focused on burial, why it's worth the extra bucks. There's a ton to talk about. We do not have time. I'm going to give you some headlines. But I encourage you, if you want more information, we have questions and comments after. You have wonderful rabbis to talk to as your resource. I'll give you some other resources for those who are interested. Okay, let's get into it. Why have Jews throughout the years focused on burial? Roman historian Tacitus, when he described us to his compatriots, he said as one of the defining characteristics, he said the Jews bury rather than burn the dead. This has stood out throughout history. Why? Well, number one, Rabbi Ephraim Oshri, rabbi in World War II, put in the Kovno ghetto, survived the war incredibly, moved to New York, and actually and told the following story. So one day he's in the ghetto and a Nazi officer barges in, slams the door behind him, blonde hair, blue eyes, and the rabbi thinks he's about to be killed. And the Nazi soldier starts speaking to him in perfect Yiddish. Rabbi, I'm a Jew. I have fake papers, I look the part. This is how I'm surviving. But I'm a very sick man, and I know what they're going to do to me when I pass. They're going to bury me in a Nazi cemetery with a Nazi cross over my body, surrounded by Nazis forever. I could do this for a few months to survive, but I can't be there for eternity. Rabbi, am I allowed to be cremated to avoid that fate? And Rabbi Oshri responded, my dear, dear child, no, you can't. What they do to us against our will, we have no control over. But a Jew must do whatever he or she can to have proper Jewish burial. In normal times, that means a Jewish cemetery. That means the rabbi saying the prayers. That means a little bit of earth from the land of Israel is put on the grave. That means the Chevra Kadisha Burial Society is preparing the body. That's normal times. In the middle of World War II, the rabbi explained, it means, but you must at a minimum try to avoid cremation, even if it means being buried in a Nazi cemetery. And he quoted verse after verse, Talmudic reference after Talmudic reference, Maimonides, Code of Jewish Law. We sometimes think that Jews and burial, it's kind of like bagels and lox. Yeah, that's what Jews did, but okay, you can do whatever you want. It's not bagels and lox, guys. This is actually a huge mitzvah, a central part of our religion. If I was creating a religion, I don't really think I would care too much about what happens to dead bodies. But our tradition does. It is all over the Torah, all over the Bible. Abraham buries Sarah. Hebron, we still visit it today. God buries Moses. Abraham is buried. Rachel is buried. Jacob is buried. A huge amount of ink is put on this subject, which is fascinating. I mean, Yom Kippur is like 2 lines. The laws of Shabbat are and burial is all over the place. Surprisingly important in our religion. Furthermore, when a new Jewish community is being formed, you know what they're supposed to do first? What are the first things that the Jewish community is supposed to take care of? A Jewish school for kids, build a mikvah, a ritual bath, and Hevra Kadisha, set up proper Jewish burial. It's one of the most important things a Jewish community is supposed to do. And this ethic has gone down through the generations. You guys recognize the name Gilad Shalit? I see some people nodding, right? He's that poor Israeli soldier. He was kidnapped by Hamas. He was held in a Gaza dungeon for about 5 years. And a number of years ago, we made an exchange for him. We exchanged 2,000 terrorists to get him out. By the way, we're all happy that he's out. He just got married or something, I heard. Thank God he's doing okay. But it was a very controversial decision. Over 200 of those terrorists have already been rearrested for new terrorist crimes. Not simple to do that kind of thing, right? Most people have heard the story, though. You may not have heard another story that several times in Israel's history, we have traded hundreds of live terrorists to get back dead bodies and give them proper Jewish burial. You can be for or against that decision, by the way. It's not a simple decision. I'm just pointing out we do it. The first reason Jews are so focused on burial, this is a surprisingly important part of who we are as Jews, of our tradition of Judaism. It's not just bagels and lox. Number two, anybody here ever been to a Jewish funeral and seeing the tradition of tearing kriya? You know what that is, tearing kriya? It's actually a double phrase, right? Kriya in Hebrew means tearing. So the translation is kind of tearing a tear, right? So the close relatives, the mourners at the time of the burial, the garment, the outer garment is torn. By the way, there's a modern equivalent I've seen more and more. I don't know if this is happening in California, where the funeral home gives a little ribbon to the mourners and then cuts the ribbon. Have you seen this? Does it exist by you? Listen, it's coming from a good place. The intentions are good. I just want to point out, that is not the point of the tradition. The point of the tradition is not that somebody gives me a ribbon and I cut it and it announces I'm the mourner. That's not the point. The point is it's my garment. It's my dress. It's my jacket. And I'm sitting there for the whole time during Shiva. I am torn. It's real. It's painful. So I want you to imagine the following scenario. When a person dies, Mother Earth tears kriya. A wound is opened up in the fabric of the earth. It is not okay. It is not normal. It hurts. It's supposed to hurt. But then, slowly, calmly, lovingly, the community, family, friends, lower the body into the hole in the ground. Earth is placed on top of it. Healing begins. Life does go on, but there is always a headstone. There is always a scar. The person is not forgotten. They have made a difference. The point is that the earth tears kriya. Healthy societies need the presence of the dead, need the funerals, need the cemeteries. There are two modern attitudes towards death, which at first sound opposite, but I find remarkably similar. Number one, people are uncomfortable with death, so they want to speed it up. That's cremation. Just get it over with. And don't do 7 days of Shiva, do 3 days, do 1 day, do an afternoon, just do a memorial service. Get it over with. I don't like this. Fast as possible. Somebody once called us the toilet assumption, meaning it's an unpleasantry. So just flush it, get rid of it, right? The other attitude is, I don't like this death stuff. I want to fight it. That's embalming. That's metal caskets. That's above ground mausoleums. They still decompose, it just lasts a little longer. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to delay it. Some people want to speed it up. Some people want to slow it down. What Judaism says is, 6 days a week, you were active building a life. 7th day, I'm not in control. Your whole life you're building, but your last statement on planet Earth, I'm not going to speed it up. I'm not going to slow it down. I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to accept it. It's a beautiful attitude to life and death. Healthy societies need the presence of the dead. Death denial is not healthy. The Jewish system is honest and cathartic and healthy. Number three, have you ever noticed this correlation between belief in God and burial? It's actually fascinating. There's exceptions and variations to every rule, but just think about it. What countries have the highest cremation rates? Far East, belief in many gods. Atheist, post-Christian Europe today, right? Belief in no God. Versus people who believe in God, one God, they have higher burial rates by far. Just think about it, by the way. The Middle East, Islam, they got it from us. No cremation in Islam. Different versions of Christianity. Historic Catholicism didn't allow it for 1,500 years. They changed about 50 years ago. Eastern Orthodox don't allow it. Judaism, honestly, got it from Judaism, right? There's only one crematorium in the state of Israel, very small, services basically the Russian non-Jewish population here, although it's making inroads, but it's still 1%, 2%, it's nothing. And even in America, by the way, the Bible Belt versus the secular coasts, it's an interesting correlation that belief in one God leads to much higher burial rates. There's a lot of literature as to why. I have a very simple theory. My theory is because the Bible, the Torah, says every human being is created in the image of God. Now, that doesn't mean that God is physical. God forbid, he's not. It means that our image is some kind of divine imprint. You don't mess with that divine image. You treat it gently. When you were 8 years old and your beloved pet dog, Spot, died, I can virtually guarantee that your mother did not say, okay, honey, you bring the dog's body over and I'll fire up the barbecue. Like, she didn't say that, did she? What did she say? Okay, you bring over the dog and we'll bury it in the backyard. Because get this, guys, we bury things we love. We bury treasure. We burn the garbage. Isn't it fascinating? Just think about it. Remember Hurricane Katrina, when those shuls were, the synagogues were flooded, and there were a ton of like Torah scrolls that were destroyed beyond repair. If a Torah scroll is damaged, Sefer Torah, Torah scroll is damaged, you bring it to the sofer, to the scribe, and they fix it. What do you do if it's irreparable? You bury it. Public ceremony, they buried it. So get this, guys. You are holier than a Torah scroll. You bury a Torah scroll, you bury treasure, but you are holier. By the way, I'll give you a simple way of understanding it. A Torah scroll is the holiest object that we have. And if God forbid there's a fire at the local Chabad, rabbis, just God forbid as a hypothetical, God forbid there's a fire at the local Chabad, are you allowed to risk your life to save the Torah scroll? Now, if you can get in there safely, the fireman says, yeah, no problem. If you can get in there safely and get the Torah scrolls, of course, go and do it. But if there is any risk, any reasonable risk to your life, you're not allowed to go and save the Torah scrolls. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, if you're old or you're young, you're healthy or you're sick, you're more observant or less observant. You are holier than a Torah scroll. We bury a Torah scroll when it's damaged beyond repair, and we bury a body. One final idea, and then we'll move to questions and comments. Raise your hand if you have ever visited a Jewish convent or a Jewish monastery. Raise your hand if you've ever visited a Jewish convent or a Jewish monastery. That was a trick question, guys. Sorry. There aren't any. Think about it. Why is that? I mean, what, you think that like Catholics are stupid? And they're not stupid. Right? They're intelligent just like we are. Right? Ask a Catholic, who's the holiest person on planet Earth? They'll probably say the Pope. Celibate, right? Not a coincidence. Nuns and priests celibate. Why is that? Well, they have a philosophy. The philosophy is, if you want to be spiritual, you want to go up to God, then you have to deny the physical. By the way, Eastern mystics, different religion, are also abstinent for this reason, right? On this point, they agree. It's either or. Spirituality, want to reach up, then deny the physical. The body is bad, right? What do we say about the body? We say the exact opposite. God is a good God that created a good physical world, and our bodies are good. My body is not my enemy. It is my soul's partner, right? You have to do the rider on the horse, not the horse on the rider. But I couldn't, like Shabbat, you have good food. You're supposed to have a beautiful, intimate life with your spouse. I mean, I couldn't give charity without my tzedakah, without my body. So no wonder that the body and the soul are partners. And when the body, it's time to go, the soul does not just forget about its partner. Imagine a woman that comes back from the cemetery. She just buried her husband of 50 years. She takes off her black dress, puts on a red party dress, and goes out to the clubs looking for a new guy that very night. Does it sound normal to you? Of course not, right? When you have a partner, you don't just move on that quickly. Body and soul are partner. The soul, in our tradition, God didn't just, create us and not give us any instructions or any indication, right? Parents try and teach their kids, just like give birth and walk away, right? So God taught us, a lot what we need to know. And one of the teachings that we have is that when the body dies, the soul stays with it. It is very concerned. It wants its body to be properly buried. goes back and forth from the burial place to the Shiva house. And that step is really important as the soul progresses on to the next world. So ladies and gentlemen, we've only touched the surface here. I want to keep time for questions and comments. We started out with the realization that more people today are choosing cremation. We went through the reasons that people are choosing cremation. We didn't do them all, but I think we did most of them. We can get back to any things we missed. And as you go through the reasons that people choose cremation, it's startling how weak they are. Not better for the environment, doesn't solve mobility problems, which because other people are doing it, I'm going to do it. Like, it doesn't make sense. There's only really one reason that does make sense. Cremation is generally cheaper. I've tried to make a case for how I understand, we don't have time to get into everything, there's a lot more, but why have Jews throughout history been so insistent on burial? Some of the reasons that we discussed, why it's worth the extra money. Some of the reasons we discussed. It's a core part of our tradition, our religion. It's not a minor thing. This is really carried through. The body is a treasure. We bury treasure. So we bury a Torah scroll, we bury a body. We burn the garbage. The earth itself tears Kriya. Healthy societies need the presence of the dead, need the cemetery, need the experience, need the burial. It's unhealthy to be in death denial. We talked about the soul, how the soul needs it going on. One more final idea, and then we'll open it up. I don't know where I got this from, but I have the following monologue in my head, where this older Jewish guy calls together his kids and says, kids, I have something important to tell you. Just listen for a minute. I want it to be clear, okay? I may not have been the best Jew on planet Earth. There were some things I did, some things I didn't do. Looking back, maybe I do things differently, I don't know. But there's one thing I do know. I was born a Jew. I'm proud to be a Jew. And when I die, I want my final statement on planet Earth to be, here lies a proud Jew. I want everything to be done correctly. I want the little bit of earth from the land of Israel. I want the rabbi to say the prayers. I want the funeral society, the burial society, Chaver Kadisha, to prepare the body. I want it done right so that my final statement on planet Earth should be, here lies a proud Jew. I don't know about you, but to me, I find it very touching. Thank you for listening, and thank you for coming. It's not an easy topic. We can, I think, open it up. Rabbi, you want to do it through the chat, or how do you want to do it, rabbis?